Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this morning because especially during Catholic Schools Week, when we honor all of the wonderful things about Archbishop Alter High School and our Catholic schools around the country, it's wonderful to have so many alumni with us this morning. So welcome to the class of 1968 and all of the Alter friends that are here to support our speaker this morning. Welcome. Let's give him a hand. Welcome him home. I am honored to introduce Dr. Quinn, who many of you know as your gym teacher. But before he was the favorite gym teacher at Alter High School, he was an Alter student and has had a very successful career. I just said I was embarrassed to hand him his long-term substitute contract because I'm sure he made more in the first 5 minutes of his medical career than he does on a daily basis at Alter. But I appreciate your attention this morning. I'm so proud that everyone gets to witness all of you because you're always so polite and respectful, and I'm excited for you to hear the message. With that, Dr. Quinn.
Okay. Thank you, Lourdes, and I'm the new professor of gymology here at Alter. Well, get ready, everyone. You're in for a treat. A glimpse into the life of Larry Connor. A glimpse that'll be both exciting and meaningful. Larry is someone I really admire, and we've been real special friends for most of our lives. Grade school together at St. Albert, high school here at Alter. And by the way, yes, indeed, we both graduated. So before Larry talks, I just want to have you travel with me just for a moment on just a couple of his adventures. Envision Mount Kilimanjaro rising like a leprous above the Serengeti in Africa and climbing to the summit of that mountain. Envision diving to the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, in a two-man submarine, and that same year blasting off in a rocket ship that you're piloting and docking that rocket ship at the International Space Station and spending 17 days there conducting life-changing scientific experiments before rocketing back to Earth. Envision for a moment skydiving with several other men and setting a world record for the altitude. Now, these are just some of Larry's adventures. I've been on a couple with him, but I'm at the learning mode of the curve. Nothing real exciting, but a couple exciting adventures with Larry. But let me emphasize Larry's commitment and generosity to our community, his love for his family, and his concern for all of us. Things like the Kids and Community Outreach programs, the Connor Pavilion for Child Life at Dayton Children's Hospital, Collins Lodge in Bellbrook, and right here at Alter, the Arts Wing. And if you look at the edifice on the Arts Wing is the name Christine Connor, Larry's wonderful wife, who is a fabulous artist herself. And the crown jewel, everyone, the crown jewel under construction in downtown Dayton, the Greater Dayton School. Just amazing. A round of applause for everything Larry's doing.
Thank you.
Now, one last thing. Do not ever say to Larry or tell him something cannot be done. By golly, he's going to find a way to do it. So now it's blast off time. Larry Connor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I suspect you're waiting for me to talk about space or the depths of the ocean, and certainly we can do that later on. But I'd like to first off have a conversation with you about opportunities, choices, and your future. But in order to do that, I think we need to create some framework. So, a few thoughts. And by the way, thanks for all of you here, the adults, for joining us. But I'm actually here to speak to all of you up there in the stands. So, you will never outperform your own self-image. Hear those words. You will never outperform your own self-image. So if, for example, you're a student here and you believe that someday you can be a researcher and do groundbreaking work to solve cancer, then you're on your way. Or in my case, when I was a student here, I never really thought, my own self-image was, I could never really go to a top 15 or 20 college or university. I couldn't probably hack it academically. So I self-limited myself and never tried to put myself in a position to have that kind of opportunity. So you'll never outperform your own self-image. Let's talk about failure. We've all experienced that to varying degrees. But failure is really, in my view, the first step to success. So when you fail, especially if you will dare to do great things, just remember, you're on your way to success. Mistakes, we all make them, but they're not necessarily bad as long as you learn from them. And lastly, mindset. Tim actually touched on it earlier. Yes, if you tell us at our organization it's impossible, we're like all in to try to do it. So we have an advantage of a can-do positive mindset. And so too, you should. So with that kind of framework and backdrop, let's talk about the three things I mentioned at the top, which is opportunities, choices, and your future. So let's talk about opportunities. We believe you can create great opportunities. How do you do that? We would argue it's through two components, passion and perseverance. How do you define those? Now let's talk about passion for a minute. Passion is something that you are really enthusiastic about. Passion is something you believe in. Passion is something that you're willing to work hard at. Passion will also help you overcome any obstacles or adversity. So you need passion. And then the other is purpose. Tim also talked about our greater Dayton school, so maybe it's best illustrated by talking about that. This is a school, by the way, that some of you may be familiar with, that's in downtown Dayton, that was created to serve our most under-resourced kids in the community. And so the key there is not the building, but the people who are inside of it. And so we went out and recruited across America what we thought were the best and brightest teachers. And we found a number of them in a group called Teachers for America. And so they came from California, Connecticut, Texas, and other places to Dayton, Ohio. And why did they come here? Purpose. Their purpose, they believe, is to teach and serve really under-resourced kids. So when you talk about opportunities, you need to find things that have passion and purpose. And by the way, one footnote there too. There are no real shortcuts. So yeah, you can find great opportunities, but at the end, it'll be hard work, you'll need dedication, and you'll need perseverance. Let's talk about the second topic, which is choices. We would argue, this may not be very popular for some of you, you are a product of your choices. You are not a product of your circumstances. So for example, let's say you were trying to get into a top flight university and you have not been successful in doing so. You may have reasons, you may have excuses, but we would say you didn't make the right choices. Maybe that wasn't studying academically, maybe that wasn't involved in extracurricular activities, maybe that wasn't involved in preparation for testing you had to do, whatever it may be. We ultimately think that you are responsible for your choices. Alter High School is a great school. That's a fact. I was a poor student. Why? It didn't have anything to do with Alder High School. It had to do with the poor choices that I made in deciding that I was not really going to apply myself. And so while I can't change that, I certainly regret that. Greater Dayton School. Our kids, as I've shared with you, come from very, very challenged circumstances. But what we try to teach our kids is that make good choices. You do not have to be defined based upon your circumstances. And the last is future. I would really encourage you, don't let other people define your future. You know, social media is a great place, but it also can be poisonous because you get other people who don't know you, don't understand you, who may try to define you and your future. So, believe in yourself and believe in your future. Do you really know at this juncture what you can or cannot do? Or what is possible or impossible? We would argue that you don't. So don't set limits. Aim high. The future is bright if you decide that it's going to be. We would also encourage you to have a plan. Write it down. By the way, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple. And then use your what we call resources. Teachers here, parents, mentors, things like that. But one thing that we would encourage you to do is only listen to and believe in people who are both knowledgeable and believable. Finally, the good news is each of you is in charge of your own destiny. I would encourage you to make good choices. And if you do so, you will have great future opportunities. So, with that, I'm now happy to open the floor up for questions. It can be on space, it can be the depths of the ocean, it could be my illustrious career here, or the lack thereof at Alder High School. So, fire at will, as they say.
Over here.
So you said you had you didn't do so well in school because your own choices and stuff. How did you turn that around?
Yeah, that's so everybody heard the question. I didn't do so well at school. That would be a kind statement, by the way. In our class here at Alter, the class of 1968, we have some of the people here. Okay. I believe we had 303 students in our class, big class. I can tell you I was not in the top 200. So I was in the bottom third of the class. I don't know exactly where, but it was pretty low. And so what happened is that I didn't have to go and look at different colleges. You know, most of you are, hey, I want to go, I want to visit this school, that. I didn't have that problem because there wasn't any school that would really take me, except one. And at the time, Ohio University, if you graduated high school in the state of Ohio, they had to accept you. So that's easy choice. That's where I went. And so what they did was, this is a true story, when you got there for orientation, they basically said, and I think our class was 4,500 or something like that. They said, look to your left, look to your right. One or both of those people will not be here at the end of your freshman year. They had a flunk out rate of over 50%. So that might have been the epiphany moment for me, like, oh, it's about to get real here. I guess I'm at a Y on the road. Either I could get my act together or I don't think it's going to work out too good for my future. So I started studying hard, got some tutors, really applied myself, and it worked out pretty well.
Up here?
Yes. How do you avoid burnout to keep your dreams alive?
How do you avoid burnout? Huh. Yeah, I really don't do burnout. I may burn some people out. It's kind of like stress. I don't get stress, but I do give stress. By the way, I will say, it's actually a very good question. I will say on a serious note that it's back to choices, making good choices. So I eat really healthy. I get the right amount of sleep. I work out essentially 6 days a week. So like anything, you know, you got to put the effort in. So, okay, another question.
I'm over here. I'm up in the front. What brought upon your interest in oceanic space research, and which was your favorite?
Yeah, so the question is my interest in space and space research. So my journey was a long one. It actually started in 2014 with reading an article about an American who had gone with the Russians to space. And I said, wouldn't that be an unbelievable thing to do? By the way, I'm absolutely not qualified to go to space. All of our astronauts here in the United States have a STEM background. They're scientists, they're engineers, they're medical doctors. I am clearly none of the above. But I went on the journey to try to find an opportunity to do it, and through a number of twists and turns and overcoming obstacles and adversity, finally got aligned with a company called Axiom that had a relationship with SpaceX and with NASA. And I told them when I first met them, I think it was 2017, that I was not interested in being a tourist. I was only interested in going to space if we could do something that was worthwhile and that would help other people. And so that's how we came upon research. I had had a long-standing relationship with both the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic, so I went to both of those organizations, who are what we call centers of excellence, and said, hey, look, off the record, I'm going to space. What would you like to do? What do you think it would be worthwhile? I'll take it with me, and I'll do anything that I can, participate in any experiments, you name it. So I offered myself up as the guinea pig, and so they enthusiastically took me up on it and kind of the rest is history. And yes, the research, by the way, do not start asking me technical stuff, because you're going to get about all my knowledge in the next 30 seconds. So the research, not only that I did, but my other crewmates, we ended up doing over 200 hours of research spanning 25 plus different experiments in space. And so one of the things that NASA actually hates us to talk about is the first week we were on station on the International Space Station, we did more research in that 1 week than has ever been conducted in any other single week in the some 23-year history of the International Space Station. So, okay.
How big was the rocket ship?
Well, so think about it this way, that it's a Falcon 9 rocket, and then on top of that sits the Crew Dragon capsule that we were actually in. In terms of the actual height, I don't actually remember, but a couple 100 feet high. And they load that thing with like 1.7 million pounds of propellant that you're literally sitting atop of when they launch it.
Hello.
Yes, good morning.
I would like to ask, what small achievements have you had during your career that may have been overlooked by your larger achievements?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What small achievements have you had in your career that may be overlooked by your larger achievements?
Huh. What's that?
His great wife.
But these are small achievements, Willie, not big ones. The big achievements would be my wife and the kids and friends and in terms of small achievements, I don't know. I'd have to. I'll give you an interesting answer. We actually don't think about the end objective. We don't really think about necessarily the outcome. And we're always thinking about today and tomorrow. I never live in the past. I'm happy to talk about some of these things, but to us, it's always the next challenge, the next endeavor, whatever it may be, and then really focusing on the process or the steps that you need to do, whether it's a small achievement or a big achievement, to get to the end objective.
Over here?
Oh. Did you see that? I turned around and looked. No, that's the speaker. The student is over here.
What did you research while you were on the spaceship?
What did we research?
Yes.
So I'll give you one. We flew for the Mayo Clinic a bunch of live cells, and it was a complicated experiment. I actually spent a total of 17 hours in the Japanese module. For those of you who don't know, there's a US side, there's a Russian side, but there's also a module called JAXA, which is the Japanese Space Station Agency. And there's another one, by the way, that's called Columbia, which is the European Space Station Agency, that are all connected together. And in JAXA, we have what's called a life science box. So I had my arms literally inside this box, total of 17 hours, one time for 5 hours, and then other times for 3 to 4 hours, taking all these cells and moving them and injecting them. And the idea was to see, how do these cells live and how do they function in microgravity. And then we actually flew them back, and they are literally still in the midst of all of that research to see what, if any, effect they had, and especially if they have negative effects. Think about going to Mars, which, by the way, is going to happen. And humans are going to be taking a couple-of-year mission. So you have to be really concerned about, aging effects, other kinds of medical issues. And so that's part of what the Mayo Clinic is trying to determine. And please don't ask me a follow-up question for more detail.
We have another question right here.
What did you eat in space?
Oh, eat in space. So, yeah. So first off, space food is not very good. But there's an amazingly wide variety. And it's all essentially dry packed. So what you do is we eat in what's called node 1. So if you think of the space station as a long spine, which, by the way, the space station, for those of you who don't know, is the length of a football field. And if we look at it this way, this half here is the Russian side, this half here is the US side. And so node 1 is the node that's right next to where the Russian side starts. And so you go in there and you'll get out something, and you might have some kind of meat, you could have spaghetti, you could have rice, you could have vegetables, but it's all been, dry packed. So then you actually insert it into a machine that's in the wall, and it fills it with hot water. And then you kind of shake it up. You cut it along the top edge, and depending upon what it is, like rice or things like that, you got to open it up. Keep in mind, you're in 0G, so everything floats. First time I tried to do this, I opened it up, opened the pack, and rice started going every place. And that's a problem. So, but it's functional, and it's pretty healthy stuff. But it's not what you would call any gourmet food. It was actually reported that we flew a bunch of gourmet food to the International Space Station. Absolutely incorrect. We flew one meal to share with the Russians and NASA Crew 3 there. By the way, one other footnote that you may find of interest. The International Space Station is truly an international effort. So obviously we were there shortly after the war in Ukraine had started. We actually one time flew over Ukraine and didn't see the bomb in flight, but saw it after it exploded, even though we're 250 miles above the surface of the earth. The visibility that day was real and good. So, but we all have to work together. So at the International Space Station, whether you're Russian, European, Japanese, Israeli, whatever it may be, we are one team. And so we here on Earth could probably take some lessons maybe from that in the future.
But they were very kind to you. Can you elaborate on that?
The Russians, oh yeah, the Russians were fabulous. Obviously the war in Ukraine going on, they weren't sure. Keep in mind, we had kind of an international group, R4. So if you look at the fellow just to the left of me, that's Eitan Stibe, Israeli, who we just came back. We just arrived from Israel, by the way, last night. And then we had another fellow there, Canadian Mark Pathy, and then the commander, Michael Lopez Alegria, who was actually born in Spain, but raised in the United States. So I was the homegrown American, and so the Russians weren't really too sure about that, and I could kind of sense that. And the Russians in certain countries, it's very much a tradition that they have you sign things and then pose for pictures. So I said, hey, come here, whatever you want me to sign, and let's pose for pictures. That broke the ice. The Russians invited us over to their side a couple of times where we shared food and stories and things like that. So, yeah, the three Russians were exceptionally good people. Yes?
Could you tell us a little bit about your journey to the Mariana Trench?
Mariana Trench, for those of you who don't know, is in the North Pacific, a couple hundred miles off the coast of Guam. And I got contacted by their exploration team that are doing research there and said, would you be interested in coming here and doing a research dive? And I didn't know anything about it. They had heard about our mission, and that's how they ended up contacting me. I didn't want to go as a tourist. I said, tell me more about what you're doing and the research you're doing. Turned out they were doing phenomenal research. So I said, look, I won't come all that way for one dive, but I will come if we did 3. And so we made a relatively small donation to help support and defray some of the cost. So the first dive in the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest place in the world in the ocean, we went to 36,000 feet. The second dive, which we did 2 days later, was to 35,000 feet. And then the last dive was the shallowest, only to 25,000 feet, to a place nobody had ever been. In fact, there's no name for it. It's actually an extinct volcano. And so on this ship, this vessel, which had a crew of 40, there were 7 scientists. And so they do research in what they call the Hadal Zone, below 19,000 feet. So extraordinary stuff. There's been papers written about some of the things that we saw. We were actually it's a 2-man, Tim said this, it's a 2-man submarine. It's free floating. It's not attached to anything. And you're in a titanium ball that's about 5 feet wide and about 5 feet high. So pretty cramped quarters. Average dive takes 12 hours, about 4 hours to get down there, 3 or 4 hours at the bottom, 3 or 4 hours back up. And we were the first humans to ever see the Mariana snailfish, which they had seen pictures of, but no humans ever seen. And we saw that at 25,000 feet. But I must tell you that I was actually piloting at the time, because the fellow who's the inventor of the submarine, Patrick Leahy, who's probably got more Hadal Zone submarine experience than anybody in the world, was operating a mechanical arm at the time. And so I knew it was something extraordinary, but I didn't know what it was. And it's about that long, about that wide, moves like an eel, and it's somewhat illuminated. So very, very unusual.
You said you don't like to live in the past. So do you have another adventure you're lining up?
Well, we might have a couple. Yeah. So there is another. Well, we're all here. We're all friends. I'm sure we don't have any reporters here, so this will all be off the record. I'm sure nobody will post anything on social media, so it'll be all good. So the question is, we don't live in the past. Do you have a couple things in mind in the future? And of course, the answer is yes. There is a potential for me to go back to space. Much longer mission, probably 40 to 60 days, complicated mission that we've been working on for a couple years to get NASA to approve. So far they have not, but we're continuing to work on it. And that mission might fly in 2025 or 2026. I actually can't tell you any more about it because we're under what they call non-disclosure agreements. But Tim also mentioned that we and myself and 4 other teammates, not the crew here from AX1, but a different group called the Alpha 5 Project, we went and set a world record jumping out of an airplane at 26,500 feet, formed a 5-man formation. We were actually going for 2 world records. We got one. The big one we were after we didn't get. So now we are having a high altitude hot air balloon built, 12 stories, and hopefully in September or early October we'll take that to New Mexico, fly that to 34,000 feet. We'll be underneath it in a gondola or a basket. The 5 of us together will step out onto a ledge and then step off and try to hold a 5-man formation to set, another world record. So, got time in the fall, thought it'd be a good idea to do. So, by the way, I should tell you something, though. I should tell you something. This is important, okay? We never do anything that has unacceptable risk. So we're always thinking about S and S, safety and success. And we did the first jump, very successful, and we will only do the second jump if we can do it safely and successfully.
Is time the same in space as it is here?
Is what?
Is time the same in outer space as it is?
Well, yeah, we're on Greenwich Mean Time, so I think it's, I can't remember, 4 or 5 hours difference than East Coast time. But yeah, and we run on a very, very tight time schedule, which is called a timeline. And NASA is monitoring all that. And so you have all these activities that can be broken down. Some could be an hour, some could be as short as 5 minutes. And it's a red timeline. And you are racing to stay at or ahead of the timeline. You do not want to get behind, because then you're going to have people from Houston or Huntsville on the comms asking you what's going on and what are you doing. So it's a very busy, complex, task-oriented, where there are what are called procedures for everything. And yes, it is true, if you're going to change, let's say, a light bulb, there's a page and a half of procedures on how to change the light bulb. And you have to follow every single one, and you literally have people with cameras at NASA watching you, and it'll take you about 20 minutes to change that light bulb. And it'd be longer, except there's 2 of you working on it, so.
What?
You go ahead.
So we had a question from the front here. Where do we sleep? It's actually a very good question. So pretty much everybody sleeps on station. I did not. For emergency procedures, you need to have someone in the Crew Dragon. So if you think about the International Space Station as the spine, we were down at this end in Node 2, and we were docked at what they call the zenith port, which would be up above, okay? And so what I would do at night is float up there to the Crew Dragon, the capsule that we had flown there on, and I would sleep up there. So if we had an emergency, because I was the pilot, I had to get in the seat and start emergency procedures. And it's actually a great place, outside of the fact that it's not very warm up there, but you keep in mind, you're floating, so you take a sleeping bag, which doesn't necessarily look like a conventional sleeping bag, kind of has a zipper down the front, and then you anchor it to 4 posts or places to anchor it to, and then you kind of get in it, and literally from the bottom, I'm maybe about this high, and I'm zipped up in it in a prone position, and you're floating up and down. So, and I didn't really have any problem. Maybe the first night a little bit, but after that, it is a little bit of a weird experience, though, to be floating in midair sleeping. And by the way, you can sleep straight up, head down, this way, whatever you want to do. I mean, I went for the more conventional laying out prone approach to it, which seemed to work well. Yes, another question.
Up here.
What degree did you graduate with?
What degree did you graduate with from college?
Oh. Yeah. Okay. So you would probably kind of assume, wouldn't you? Oh, he's got some kind of business degree or something like that, finance. That would be no and no. So my degree is in English, and my concentration was in Shakespearean literature. So that's my degree. By the way, that's a good example. You don't have to be qualified to do some of these things.
Did you see any mysterious creatures or anything in space?
Actually, we were invited by the Israeli government and their space station agency to come to Israel, and my wife and I and son went there a week or so ago, and as I said, we got back last night. And we were on a panel, and that very topic came up. And there is, in the space community, believe it or not, there is a sector that debates that and believes that there's other things out there. And so my personal experience, disappointing answer, no, I didn't see anything. Depending upon who you would talk to, they would say maybe they did. But our commander, Mike Lopez Alegria, who, by the way, is a Hall of Fame astronaut, this is his 5th time to the International Space Station, he thinks that some of the sightings that they have seen, that ultimately there is a logical explanation for each. I think that's kind of boring. I'd rather go with the aliens. All right.
What was your biggest accomplishment in your life?
Biggest accomplishment in life? Huh. I think in the aggregate, helping other people, whether it's our not-for-profit, business, other people who we've been able to help in a myriad of different ways.
Hi, Larry. My name is Matt Fowler. I'm a class of 79 grad.
Okay.
At Alter, and we had 331 in my class. We think we were the largest graduating class, but the students here might be shocked to know that when I was a senior, we had 1,251 students here in the school. And that's before the building behind the school was finished. So we were taking classes in the bus garage at the convent and everything. But this is beside the point. With all the adventures that you've been on, with the skydiving, the mountain climbing, space, the Mariana Trench, is there anything that you would say, okay, I've done that, I'm never doing that again?
Yeah, that's so. No, I don't think so. So mountain climbing. So here's the deal with mountain climbing. And I haven't done a ton of it, but I've done a fair amount. Mountain climbing is really about two fundamental things. How much are you willing to suffer, and how much risk are you willing to take? So at one point, I had seriously thought about climbing Mount Everest, and then decided against it for those very reasons. I've actually thought about it in recent years. There's in Antarctica a mountain called Vinson that's not nearly as high, spectacular scenery, but the average temperature during the day is -20. And so, yeah, that probably fits the category of I'm not doing any more of that.
Real quick question. So you're an entrepreneur, right? I'm over here, sorry.
Yeah, I don't, but I guess so. I'm not sure what that word really means, but anyway, yeah.
So there's so many new entrepreneurs today. What advice would you give to like a new entrepreneur who wants to be successful and like make it big?
Yeah. So I would go right back to, it's actually an excellent question. I go right back to, and I talk at the University of Dayton every year to the Entrepreneurial School, and here's what I tell them. It's not about you want to be rich or how much money you're going to make. It goes back to if you can find something that you have real passion and purpose about, you have a decent chance to be successful. But if you're doing it to, hey, I think I can make a bunch of money or something like that, I've never really ever seen it work. And then there's other things you need to think about in terms of having a plan, getting the right, we call it the 3 Ps. If you get the right people together, you got the right plan and the right processes, you have a good chance to be successful.
From your personal experience, is the Earth flat?
No. No. I am here. To put that rumor to rest. I can unequivocally tell you that there is curvature. By the way, the interesting thing is, too, you are moving at almost 18,000 miles an hour. So let me tell you one quick story. So the first week we were exceptionally busy. Toward the end, we were supposed to be a 10-day mission. We had weather, and so we ended up being 17 days, which turned out to be great. So about day 12 or 13, Mateus, who's the astronaut from the European Space Agency, said, hey, take a break, come up to the cupola with me, and we'll take a look. So we got up there. He had been there for 4 or 5 months, very smart guy. So he said, well, we're crossing, we were actually going west to east. He goes, we're crossing over Hawaii. And I looked around, I go, okay, I'll take your word for it. He goes, do you see the United States? I'm like, what? I looked out, he goes, wait just a moment. Sure enough, I don't think it was 30 seconds later, here comes the West Coast. And it was almost like what you would see in a road atlas, the shape of California. Like, it looked just like in the road atlas book. And so we went over that, and somehow we started talking for a minute, felt like only a minute. He goes, look down. So I looked out of the cupola, and I see this huge city. He goes, that's New York City. So literally, we had gone from the West Coast, California, to New York City in a matter of minutes. So and if it's clear, the view's absolutely amazing.
Is there anything interesting you saw in the Mariana Trench?
Yeah, so the Mariana snailfish is certainly the biggest thing that we saw, but this is the problem when you're not really a trained Hadal Zone scientist. We'd see other formations and things, and by the way, at 36,000 feet, oh, for those of you who don't know, once you get below 600 feet, it's dark. So we have lights, we have cameras, we had 3 small portals to kind of view out of, okay? But at the bottom, 36,000 feet, the water clarity is actually very good. There's a ton of silt, so you have to be careful. So we're operating the submarine about 2 meters off of the bottom, which is about 6.5 feet. And a lot of it I was piloting. And so you're going along and you see these different formations and things like that. But me being able to identify them, I'm not qualified to do that. Now, the fellow I was with, Patrick Leahy, could. But yeah, they've written a number of papers on our 3 different dives that we did. So.
Good morning, Larry. I'm Dennis Percy. I'm a class of 91 alumnus and a current parent of a junior here. I've seen you speak at UD a couple times, and one thing, could you speak to our students here at Alter about succeeding in Dayton? You were able to build your business in Dayton. You've talked about what a great community it is and sharing how you can be successful in this community versus going somewhere else in the world.
Sure. So, little bit of background. We have different businesses. The biggest one is a real estate investment firm. We operate in 18 cities around the U.S., high-profile cities. Austin, Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, Denver, Minneapolis, Nashville, Charlotte, on and on and on. So, as I travel around the country, people say, hey, where are you from? I said, Dayton, Ohio. You get to look like, you don't look like you'd be from Dayton, Ohio. And I'm like, okay. Anybody who cares to listen, here's what I tell them. Well, what's important to you and your business? Do you want a great labor pool? Dayton, Ohio's got it, much better than most cities. Do you want high quality of living? Dayton's got it. You want excellent schools? The Dayton area's got it. Do you want reasonable cost of living? Dayton's got it. Do you want not a lot of traffic? Dayton's got it. Do you want safe place to raise your family? Dayton's got it. So there's a whole bunch of benefits that you have being in the greater Dayton area. And so that's the theme that we talk about when we talk to businesses that are thinking about coming into the area, or when I'm talking to entrepreneurs at the University of Dayton about staying in this area to start your business. Susie?
Beyond college, I know I bought my first Volkswagen.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Especially for these kids. How did you parlay that? Oh, I said beyond college. I know I bought my first Volkswagen from Larry.
Yes, true.
And so I'm just curious, and for these kids, how did you parlay your future goals with that start?
Yeah. So, Susie asked a good questions. So, got out of college at the time when I got out, which was a couple years ago. The job market was not particularly great at the time. And so I grew up next door to a gentleman who was a small business owner. And his last name was Wick. So I went over and I saw Mr. Wick and I said, hey, Mr. Wick, I'm a senior, I'm getting ready to graduate. Any advice you have for me? And Mr. Wick was kind of a former football player and smoked big cigars. And he goes, college boy, you don't really know anything about the real world. So go sell something to the public. And I always was kind of interested in cars. So literally down on South Dixie, there was a Volkswagen, Hayden Norton Volkswagen. So I went down there and sold cars. And you really had to deal with the public, skeptical public coming in who, used car dealer, new car dealer. And so you learned a lot about connecting with people, building relationships, doing what you say you're going to do, customer service. So believe it or not, that whatever it was, year, 14 months, was actually very fundamental because it was real world experience. So what I try to tell students at the University of Dayton or other places is, yeah, hey, going and getting higher education is really, really good, but then you need to get some practical application. Susie and I happened to work together at E.F. McDonald here in Dayton, Ohio, and it was the biggest corporate incentive company at one time in the world. And so we traveled all over the world organizing new car shows, business meetings. It could be in Paris, it could be in Japan, it could be in all kinds of parts of the world. So you learned a lot about how to organize things, run things, dealing with problems and adversity. So I think in the aggregate, that practical application was really beneficial.
Because of our schedule, we can take one more quick question.
Oh, wait a minute. My boy, what do you need, buddy? You going to stand up?
Yes. Dad, how do you feel in space? Go to a movie of Star Wars, and I wish I feel bad because I want to go with you in space. I think I'm ready because I want to do it.
So for any of you who go to the University of Dayton basketball games, that's the famous Colin Connor, who many. So as I walk around the University of Dayton, nobody really knows me, and especially at the arena, but everybody knows him. So he says that he's ready to go to space, so some will have to see what happens, but that's definitely a possibility. And yes, when we'll go and see the movie when it's appropriate. By the way, one thing you do on the International Space Station is Saturday night is movie night. So in Node 1, we invite the Russians and everybody to get together, and they kind of pull up a screen, and we have a whole repertoire of movies to watch. The ones that are a little challenging are the ones that are in Russian, because I do not speak Russian. All right.
All right. Mr. Connor, on behalf of the entire Alter community, we thank you for coming in this morning and sharing with us your adventure, your journey, and your passion in making the world a better place. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow. All right, buddy, we did it.
Yeah, we did that.
All right, all right. Thank you very much, and good luck to all of you.